Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Matches Native podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brian, John Byrne, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes, on the back of what was a Galactical performance against Newport in the FA Cup. In all
I
seriousness,
was I was uh I was waiting to see which vocabulary word you'd bust out for the performance there, and
oh,
I thought
right,
I thought that was a good one.
straight, straight out of Eton. That's top drawer stuff, right? But no, 4-2. Most important thing was to win. But seems like there's never an easy game for Manchester United. Lots to talk about. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the news. We'll talk about, of course, Marcus Rashford. And some of the other things. We'll talk to you about Anthony Martial's injury. Guardiola getting a bit snippy. We'll talk about some of the speculation. Michael Olise possibly. United being linked with a young midfielder at Genk, Bilal El Kunas, an 18-year-old. And one or two other things. So, first of all, mate, how you doing?
Pretty good. Good Monday. Good to get through all of this. I think some of it will be pretty cathartic,
Yeah,
but
felt like it's been ages since United last played.
it really did. That 2 weeks felt like you kind of almost forget the season is ongoing with
Yeah.
everything that's happened and everything that's continuing to happen. It's been kind of odd, hasn't it?
So they play Newport County away, a game that United were expected to win comfortably. I'm not defending United in any way here, but there's a couple of things that I want to say because I felt sometimes the coverage is a bit disrespectful. United should win this game, no question. But what people need to understand, and a lot of people do understand it, but some people don't, the lower leagues, even in baseball, out here, AAA or whatever, there are lots of players at that level that are good enough to play in Major League Baseball. But for whatever reason, maybe they don't have the discipline, or there's something going on in their personal life, or so that just prevent them. Maybe they don't get the right breaks. Who knows? At League One, there is a lot of very good footballers that aren't consistent. Right, consistency is the hardest thing to get in life. And then there's players that were playing Premier League academies and stuff that are down there. And plus, it's filled with a lot of big physical ex-pros that will put it on kids. And I remember watching United against Wrexham, who of course the same level, over the summer. And one of the things that really stood out was how physical they were with the likes of Mabry and stuff. So I think it's difficult. It's the United should still win the game, but sometimes you have to give Newport some credit too.
Yeah, you do. I think down there, obviously, you're going to have teams that want to get up for it. Now, interestingly, I felt that the first 20 minutes they were a bit shell shocked. Newport,
Mm-hmm.
they seemed like they weren't really playing at all. And after they went down 2-0 and they got that kind of goal from nowhere, the deflected shot that was just a rocket, but it was a huge deflection, a very unlucky goal to concede for United. It kind of came to life a bit, but it is kind of crazy. I give them credit for sure. And obviously have some talented players and individuals and all of that. I think the problem, of course, is that for United, it doesn't really matter who the opposition is.
Yeah, you're
Does it?
right.
It's the same problems, the same issues that come out of halftime, give up a goal right away. They get shell shocked in return, and I'm not saying that those players that like you said about the players is true. At the same time, it's almost inexcusable for a team of United's stature to be stunned, shocked, or otherwise thrown off their game in any way mentally by a team that far down the table. They just can't allow it. You can't as a team say, well, man, they scored a few and get thrown off your game and kind of be trying to get frustrated and figure it out. I mean, it's you have the quality to win. You have the better team. You have to win. It is the mental fragility of the team is almost incredible when you think about some of the players who are on that pitch as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about a few of them but it's very strange to me.
Look, here's the thing about these games: you can't give the other team life, and this is a big pivotal moment. Was obviously the moment where Garnacho hits the bar. And you always have to guard against a deflection going in off somebody's arse, lifting the crowd and putting the
Yeah.
team back in the game. But United should have the resilience to deal with that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how many times have we seen this happen with United where they'll concede a goal and then all of a sudden they'll concede a second goal? And, and we've heard Ten Hag talk about this, about how we should be able to handle that, right? At
Yeah.
Premier League level, should be able to handle that at League One level. And some of the things that I concern me is when you hear Bruno Fernandes singling people out, saying that 2-0, everyone wanted a goal, and it's not a hanging offence that Garnacho doesn't shoot and hits the bar, right?
Mm.
He's still young, right? And so these are the types of things you get with young players. We were talking about Marcus Rashford's biggest weakness being decision making 18 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not something that's totally unexpected. But what was obvious there, James, was the visible frustration of Hoyland and other United players they were really starting to get angry at Garnacho and the refusal of United wingers to put the ball in early, which undoubtedly is a major reason why United are so poor in front of goal.
It is, and obviously we'll get to Rashford and some of the situation in a minute. But for much of this season, especially the last 6 to 8 weeks, I think he's one of the few players who has been feeding passes to Rasmus Højlund when he gets a chance to,
Yes,
and pass them to him, and it's something that I think because of understandably the current frustration over other issues that people are ignoring a little bit about his game, but he's been almost too unselfish because his goal scoring has been very poor this season. His confidence in front of goal as a shooter has been pretty bad, but he's been passing quite a lot, and it is something you want to see more of from the other wingers. You really do. You want to see more of it from the other wingers, Garnacho, but it'll happen. It will come from players like Garnacho. I understand. I mean, at Garnacho's age, most wingers are score first, and they barely look for the pass, and it's the thing they've got to add to their game that they have to really focus on, working in, and he will. And I think interestingly, in the prior games when he played from the right, he did it a lot more. The angles were different for shooting, so he looked for more of the pass, and I thought it was better. And then, interestingly, Anthony's assist, his first one of the season, comes from the left. Comes from cutting to the left,
and what did he do?
cutting
He hit
it back.
early.
Yeah, puts it in early, low cross in, and a goal. It's like it's kind of anyway, yeah, there's a lot of obviously there's a lot of reasons why, but there was a moment, I think everybody caught it, where Højlund by the end of the game was actually screaming at Garnacho after one of the possessions about not passing the ball in, and it is frustrating. But players aside, when is it going to change? I guess why is it not? When you're playing with a striker like Højlund, he's been there some time now. It still seems very limited, the patterns of play to help get him on the ball and get him chances in the box. There's only so much he can do, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at his last few goals, the goal against Villa comes from a corner. That
Yep.
the goal against Spurs comes from not having the ball scored to him. Rashford sort of losing control of the ball,
Like
holding
a block shot, sort of. Yeah.
and the goal yesterday, of course, similar. But the positive is he's now starting to score in succession. He's now starting to get a bit of run in, yes, against Newport, but that's going to help him in terms of his confidence, because when you've seen United have these 2-week breaks, previous international breaks and stuff, any momentum that they gained before was always lost. So that's going to be really important for Rasmus Højlund, that he's now scoring with some consistency.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is. And he need that. I mean, he was getting chances earlier in the year, but missing quite a few of them. Not a lot of chances, mind you, but he was missing them. There was no doubt he should have scored more goals earlier in the season. But now he's finishing them. He's getting a chance, and he's taking it when he's getting those chances, and that's important. I think being clinical, something United need desperately from one of their forwards, is to really finish chances at a high rate, and he's doing that. And if he can get a few chances a game, you can start counting on him just to score. And I think that's really big for him. But it's, like you said as well, it's a confidence factor too, because he's obviously a talented kid. He's very physical. He's very fast. He's got a lot of potential and a lot of tools. And so sometimes it really is just sorting the mental side of it. And there's a lot of pressure coming into United to be the starting striker, given the situation.
The other positives were, of course, Kobe Mainoo scores,
Yeah. Yep.
exceptional. I love watching this kid play. I
Mm.
just he's just a brilliant young footballer, and he has so much that you can't coach.
Yep.
That is natural. He scores. Anthony scores, of course. I know that goal looks like it happened, but that ball comes at him relatively decent speed on his right foot. Right, takes it, scores. He needs a goal badly. I don't want to see any United player fail. I would love for Anthony to shove all my criticism down my throat, go on an amazing run between now and the end of the season, and find his form. So United have played a behind closed doors game leading up to this against Burnley, lost the game 3-1. Anthony scored a penalty in that game. They were 3-0 down after 10 minutes in that game. So Burnley have done the double. By the way, I was listening to some of the coverage on that in the Excellent Talk of the Devils podcast. So, but the interesting that they obviously trying to get some match fitness for Casemiro, for Martinez, which is another big positive from yesterday. But how much do you think this is going to help Anthony with, I mean, people say it's Newport, but to him, it's a competitive game of football.
I try to be unbiased, but frankly, I don't know it makes much of a difference, and I'll say why. It's good for confidence, but I don't think that's the problem. Anthony's had 2 good performances this season, or better performances this season. One of them was against Newport, and one of them was in the Champions League, I believe.
Against Galatasaray away, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Played well against Galatasaray away.
Yeah. His problem is he's not quick enough or strong enough for the Premier League, and nothing's really going to change that. So when he plays against a bit lower opposition, which he'd be more used to playing from Ajax, more on a week in, week out basis, you're playing against fullbacks. You're faster than, you're quicker than, you're stronger than, and you're more talented than. And you can kind of cheat by bringing yourself up in a career based on that. It happens to players in the Bundesliga a lot too. We saw it with Jadon Sancho. You come into the Premier League and you're no longer faster, stronger, or quicker than all of your fullbacks, all your opponents you're facing. It happens with wingers and forwards so often. And you struggle because a big part of your game has always been that. And when Anthony has been able to beat his opponents on the ball, he performs well and he's talented and he has the ability when he can beat his opponents on the ball. He can't beat his opponents in the Premier League. He really, we've seen it so many times. He goes up against the fullback. They know exactly what he's going to do. He can't beat them. That's that. That's the problem. And so it's a bit of an overarching concern there, because I think it's more to the point that he has to change his game rather than just gain confidence. He's got to change the way that he plays to where it's not reliant on, kind of isolating against the fullback and then trying to quickly get around them or cut inside and shoot. It just doesn't work. Even that part of his game against Newport wasn't successful. He tried quite a few times, cut inside, shoot, and it was very it was poor, and the shots I think were pretty much all off the target. But so it's good that he's producing. It's good that he's adding something to it. But it doesn't, I think, change the fact that there's very little to say we don't need a right winger who's better than that moving forward to be competitive in the Premier League. Which
Okay.
I guess I would say Garnacho was a lot better on the right wing, even in that performance. I much preferred Garnacho's last few games at right wing.
Let me ask you 2
Yeah.
other quick questions. Bayandier's performance. It was the first time we got a look at him. Conceded 2 goals. I'm not sure you could blame him on either of them. You saw him play with his feet a little bit. 1 or 2 nervy moments, but I would want to get your opinion. And of course, the Martinez, Casemiro, and Shaw return, big plus for United.
Yeah. I liked Bayindir. I thought he was decent. The thing I think was most positive, he was pretty safe with his hands. When he would catch the ball, he would go to claim a cross or claim a high ball or something. He would pretty much, he caught it. He was quite safe with it. Onana's had some very weird moments with that, kind of putting the ball back into play off of his hands at times. It's been a weird start to things for Onana, who of course also has now they crashed out of out of AFCON. They're out of the cup there. He was benched the last 2 games. He stayed extra late. Really weird situation. I'm not sure that's all been very good for him. And it's been quite a distraction, I think, for him. So
Well,
obviously he'll be starting again.
Cameroon for his cousin. I
What's
didn't
that?
realize Onana was dropped in
Oh,
Cameroon
really?
for his cousin. So
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that either. I was just doing research on it last night, and they were saying that he was replaced by his cousin in goal. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah, so probably not great for him, but he's going to get a starting spot back. I mean, apparently he's going to start right away at Wolves, which no
Big
surprise.
risk for Ten Hag because Ten Hag's job is on the line here,
Yeah.
and he really has to have complete confidence in the players that he puts in because if Onana costs him a game. I mean, if you look at United's goals from set pieces, 24% of their goals this season have come from set pieces that they've conceded. That's a quarter of the goals they're conceding are coming from set pieces. This is something that United should be able to fix on the training ground or not. And when you look at the other stats in the games, 21 goals, 24 goals, 21 games. That's poor. They average 51.8% possession in the Premier League. That means they're not really dominating games and dominating possession. And in the Champions League, it's worse. They were averaging 45.9% possession in the Champions League against Galatasaray, against Copenhagen. So this is a big concern about how they. But they need to impose themselves on games. And listen to the stats. McTominay has a better pass completion rate than Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes plays a bit more forward, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. So his the final balls, it's definitely passing the ball 2 feet to someone, but yes.
Yeah, let's talk about that too. Because you just asked, because I want to talk about Casemiro. Because I have a couple of complaints a little bit about two things, and it's been highly noticed. When Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo played together, I was expecting them to form a very solid, deep partnership where they're both at their strongest. And instead, I mean, I know he scored a goal, which is a very big positive. Kobbie Mainoo scoring his first goals as a senior United player. But he was so far forward most of the game. It was not how he's been playing recently. It's not where he is at his best. He's an incredibly talented player, so he made it look good, and he was making good decisions, and he's still got such quality on the ball. But it continues to be so strange how it's like we cannot get away from this midfield that ends up with these massive gaps where 2 players are all the way up and one of them sitting deep. I don't think it plays to Kobbie Mainoo's strengths to do that. I don't think that plays to the strengths of the players that we have to do that. So that's one thing. Casemiro's pass percentage as the deepest midfielder was horrific as well. It was really bad. It was like in the 50s for the first half. I think he ended like 66, 68%, something like that. But more concerning to me, I know he's just back from injury, but he looks off the pace against Newport. He looks unfit physically. He has since summer, and he's had a few injuries. He looks much, much slower. He's always fouled a bit much anyway, but he had quite a few moments where he clearly just fouled because he couldn't keep up with the player. Even the first goal that they scored, he was completely out-muscled on the jump for the ball. That fell to the player that ended up scoring the goal off the deflection. I don't see it's like I literally do not see with my eyes the Casemiro of last year at United, and that is a bit concerning. I think we've all kind of figured he's probably maybe he's going to depart in summer for Saudi or somewhere like that, but I mean, what do you what's your take on this? Because I
I
just don't
think,
see him at a level he's been at.
I don't want to judge him on yesterday because, he's clearly not match fit. If you look at him from the start of the season, yes, you can have legitimate concerns. But I covered this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago where I spoke to an individual that played professional football, played for Manchester United, had a 15-year professional football career that is renowned for his tactical knowledge and how he breaks down games. And what he said to me is it was based that one of the reasons why they're so exposed is because of the gaps between the defense and the midfield and the front.
Yeah.
Like when the front line presses, the defense drops off. So there's big gaps in the midfield. So which is bizarre to me because, like I said before, United had the best defensive home record in the league last season. Why are they now doing something completely different? But so I don't know. But I think, again, when we talk about Ten Hag, if he's going to save his job, he's going to need the best Casemiro, and because he was such a crucial part to United last season. I mean, you go back, James, last season, United's big games. Casemiro showed up. He showed up away at Chelsea, showed up in the League Cup, away to Bournemouth when United needed to go, leaving Chelsea at home. He was so integral to United last season. And and yes, he was poor at the start of the season, but he was scoring goals, he was scoring important goals. So I don't know how Ten Hag fixes this. What did concern me is the fact that someone that understands football is attributing some of United's mistakes and vulnerabilities not to injuries, not to off the field, but to how United are set up. And undeniably, United once again conceding within 2 minutes of the restart. This is just way too consistent. But I don't know. But if you have anything else to say on that, let me know. We'll move on to some.
No, that's not too much else for the cup. Obviously, I think it was a very strong lineup. I wish we hadn't come away from it feeling maybe less confident than beforehand, but obviously there'll probably be a pretty similar lineup against Wolves, and we'll get another picture of how this works out in the Premier League on Thursday.
Well, let's get to that, because one of the main talking points, of course, was Marcus Rashford, and Marcus doing something that was ill-advised. Marcus, of course, went to Belfast, went out Wednesday and Thursday. There's a couple of things I would think were pretty poor judgment on Marcus's part. Obviously, his friend Sean Williams signed for an Irish league club called Larne, and I went over there. I spoke to people who were involved in that, and they could not speak highly enough of Rashford. They said he was exceptional, spent time with players, the young players, of course, idolized him, and the club were quite angry. A lot of the stuff that came out, really. Nonetheless, this looks really bad on Marcus. And they were off for a week. If he'd have went over the week before, fine. From what I understand, they were off Wednesday. Wednesday was a rest day. Again, a lot of this information, the coverage of this coming from Laurie Whitwell on Talk Devils, he broke it down well. I was listening to it yesterday. Some of it I know myself, having contacts in Belfast, but so I'm not sure they would have been thrilled with him even being there on the Wednesday. And the thing is, James, there's no anonymity for Marcus Rashford in Belfast. He'd be one of the most immediately recognised faces. I mean, this is like a Yankees player going out in the Bronx. You have no expectation of anonymity. So I really don't understand why Marcus would do something like this, mislead the club, think it's going to remain. Think that'll be sufficient. This is not going to come out. And why he'd make these choices. This is a guy that has been trying to prove that he doesn't have an attitude issue, that that the problem isn't him. I really like Marcus, I do. This is stupid on his part. It does not look good. I think what he should do is he should come out and apologize. He should come out and say, I got it wrong. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this, and take the responsibility away from the club. If human beings admit error, most people are forgiven, right? Because none of us are perfect. But Ten Hag's in a difficult situation. Notably, he did not cover it publicly in the same way that he did Jadon Sancho. And you and I have said in the past, well, certainly I believe that Ten Hag made a mistake by going public on Jadon Sancho. I think he
Yeah.
should have dealt with that internally and not went public on it, because then it forces a different situation. Ten Hag does not have the ability to go public with Rashford because they have no alternative. I mean, they can't sign a striker. He's limited to what he can do. He has to discipline him. Rashford could
Mm-hmm.
miss the game against Wolves away for the second year in a row because of disciplinary issues. Ten Hag was obviously very angry about it yesterday. And to me, whether Ten Hag's there or not, the rule that Rashford broke is not contingent upon who your manager is. That is a fundamental rule of the football club.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we were talking about that because I've said before, even with Jadon Sancho, it's the type of thing I feel is above the manager to deal with. I think it's almost unfair to make it a problem for the manager. You know, they're not their babysitter. They're not the manager's job is not to rule over these players' personal lives, and to control them constantly all the time or anything like that. You know, you have many instances at clubs where the players are there beyond multiple managers. Small clubs, middle clubs, big clubs happens all the time. Players are there for multiple managers. Very often, they play for multiple managers over the course of their career. It's not about the manager. It is about the club. It's about what the club rules are for the players, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, the type of discipline and the type of standards that need to be maintained by a football club. As you would with any organization, you know, if you were in a in a section of a business as an employee, it wouldn't be on the middle manager to determine whether you showed up for work or not. It's going to be on other people.
Yeah, we've
To
all had the night out and phoned in sick the next day.
Yeah,
Responsibility comes at a certain level where
yeah,
it's different if you're doing it, in an office job or okay,
yeah,
but I think at that level,
yeah.
you would a bit more professionalism.
It was bad. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I think that there's a lot more that players get up to that people don't
Oh,
know about. That is probably significantly worse, including United players, including other United players. There's many that have had discipline issues that have not been covered because they have not done so as sometimes you say the crime is getting caught, and that was part of it with Rashford too. But the biggest factor is he didn't show up for training. That for me is sort of the paramount to it. Is that I wouldn't advise you being out late. I wouldn't say it's smart. I wouldn't agree with doing it. I wouldn't do it. I would say that I don't want players to do it personally. If you show up for training, you perform is different. The United players under Sir Alex did that plenty. Plenty. They were certainly not choir boys outside of,
no,
of
of course
work
not, James.
hours.
Again,
But they showed up and they performed, right?
yes.
Yeah, they showed up. He didn't show up, and that's a problem. That's a serious problem because you can't because then you're open to everything when you don't show up.
I thought he did show up, but he said he was sick. He reported sick.
Apparently, he reported sick and didn't come in, so he
Gotcha.
called. It's more like a call-in sick. You got to show up. You have to show up. I mean, maybe they often do send club doctors over to verify things like that. We don't know. They obviously don't want to discuss it or tell anybody about it, but it doesn't really matter. He didn't show up, and for me, that would be the main thing. If I've got an employee, if they don't, if they show up and they're a bit groggy, I can deal with it. I know if they don't show up on Monday morning, why. I know why. There's no argument anymore. It's not acceptable to me. I mean, it happens, but at a
So
little
especially if
level,
you're
it's like,
uploading to Facebook, your pictures, your party, it's like,
right?
I'll be smart,
Yeah,
to me,
exactly.
like, that's just where I don't understand what Marcus was thinking, but
It was thick. It was thick. And here's the thing about it though, at the same time, right, is that there's no excuse for that type of behavior for sure. And it has to be sorted out because he needs to do better. He should be better. Um, he should be more of a leader at United. It's not 100% in his nature as a personality from all that I've gathered about him over the years to be, like he's never going to be like, I think about long-term players like Wayne Rooney, who not necessarily always a leader, but has definitely a different personality to Marcus Rashford. I don't think he's going to be
I
a
mean,
club
Rooney had
captain.
had
I
his
know he had his
some
issues
issues
too.
too. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, but Rashford, I think, is the longest standing United player at the moment, right? By quite a bit.
yeah, he's got to be up
Active
there.
player. I mean, Luke Shaw has been here quite a while, but otherwise, I think between
Well,
the
yeah,
two of
Shaw
them,
was brought in by Van Hal that first season,
yeah,
so probably similar.
about
But
the same time.
did you see the Nicky Butt clip about Marcus?
Mm-mm.
So Nicky Butt, I believe this was done over the
Or maybe
weekend,
I did. Oh no, go ahead. Yeah,
which
go
was
ahead.
really, really interesting. And Nicky knows Marcus very well, and he was saying, like, I love Rashford, I'm very loyal to him. I love him as a person. He's a great lad, and he has done a lot of amazing things off the field. He goes, but he is not happy in his personal life. There's stuff going on with Marcus mentally. And forgive me if I'm getting some of this, paraphrasing it slightly incorrectly, but
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is what he was saying. And that he needs to be happy in his life. You can see that he's not happy. Um, he definitely projects an air of someone that is dealing with something personally. Um, and we do sometimes have to be careful with that, where we've seen situations, and by no means am I saying that they're completely symmetrical, but like Dele Alli, but what we know is that players deal with things personally.
yeah.
And I'm not saying that we should always assume that, but uh, when you get someone like Nicky Butt saying that Marcus is dealing with a lot of things personally, um, what I wonder, James, is Marcus looks like a lad that might need a move, a change, a scenery. And this happens a lot. Steven Gerrard had went through this at Liverpool. He ended up staying. But when you're a homegrown player, it works two ways. When things are going well, you get showered with
Yeah,
love. When not, it's a very difficult place to be because
yeah.
you can't go out, you can't do anything, you can't live a normal life, you can't blow off steam, you can't be a normal 26-year-old. I believe Marcus broke up with his girlfriend over the summer, so he wants to be a normal human being in some sense, and you do forfeit that. But he looks like someone that, and if you listen to what Nicky Butt saying, probably he's dealing with stuff personally too.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. And so, for me, with any player, I try to stick to keeping my critiques for them as a footballer, because
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, it gets very messy. These are individuals, these are people. And you forget with professional athletes,
Yeah.
they're not, I'm just say they're not like somehow magically more emotionally
No.
mature than your average person. In many cases, they have less schooling, less education, just to the nature of having spent all their time in football. It just is what it is. That's true with professional athletes in any sport on average.
But in that like the fans teams, even if you are educated or exceptionally well
You
educated,
deal with
dealing with
you
the
deal with shit.
emotional
Yeah,
aspect, the
you
pressure, the
do.
stress, it's very
Yeah,
difficult.
you do, and it's hard, and it is hard for anybody. So I try to stick to how they play as a footballer, what they do, and how they perform. And that's why I say for me, it's that, and I love Marcus Rashford. I've defended him so many times on this show and elsewhere and all that. Is that he didn't show up for training is the biggest thing for me. That he's not there to perform, to support the team, to all of that. Then you have to take these other things and say, well, that's obviously got to be a factor in why. We can put 1+1 and get 2 and say you're out late, you're doing this, you do that, you fly back in the morning before training. Not really a smart move, and you don't show up. So it is what it is there. That being said, obviously the discourse, I think, gets a little bit out of control, as you said, with homegrown players. I don't know what it is about that, but especially because I've seen a lot of statements and things about, like, indications that something like this means a player should be sold, means a player should, like, that's the end of their career at United. That's kind of interesting because football fans, I think, in general, tend to be pretty liberal when it comes to their political views, especially United fans overall. And and then when a player does something, I think they get pretty conservative pretty quickly when it comes to labor and employment thought process. But this is not the type of thing a player gets sacked over or should be sold for. When you look at discipline and how someone is disciplined, there's always two things that you are going to weigh up to it. Is number one, um, are they cognizant of having done wrong?
Mm.
Will they admit doing wrong? And are they apologetic towards moving forward and wanting to improve upon that? That's for the club to decide if they are. You have a situation, take for example, Jadon Sancho. Well, he didn't meet that first qualification for the club. He wasn't willing to move forward with the situation. Now it makes it very different. Marcus Rashford already apologized once to Eric Ten Hag immediately upon the story of going out after the Manchester Derby to celebrate a birthday. And they'll deal with it internally because it's a second offense of something like that this season. But that's number one. Is he willing to do that? And that's on the club to decide. And the
Well,
second thing is weighing in contributions. You know, you have a really good employee who's contributed a lot over the years to you, who's done a lot. You don't say, oh, they did something, they're out of here. You always weigh up the value, and I'm not talking financial, I'm talking the value that they bring as an individual, as a teammate, as an employee, as a part of a group, and their contributions, and say, you know, are they damaging us in excess of the positives that they have brung? And you kind of always have to weigh those things up in terms of how you discipline, because selling a player, getting rid of somebody is a huge step. I mean, it is a massive step, and I think
mhm.
it is absolutely ridiculous to suggest that that would be, or anything even close to reasonable as an outcome from something like this, unless, you know, Rashford was not willing to improve upon himself in the situation.
Yeah, it's all about how he responds to it. It doesn't have to be terminal. If Marcus responds in the
Yeah,
right way, shows form, between now and the end of the season, this
yeah,
will be forgotten about by the end of the season.
yeah,
But how we remember this will be determined about how
yeah,
Marcus responds to it. If
yeah,
he responds the right way, apologizes, I made a mistake, and gets his head down, then fine, we'll move on.
yeah.
Um, couple of other things, yes. United will end up playing Bristol City or Forest in the next round of the FA Cup. Forest will be a difficult game. It's another away game. I remember when we played them a few weeks ago, the Morgan Gibbs White clip of "Look at their faces, they don't want to be there," right?
Yeah,
Which is quite defining. Um, you know, Bristol City, the draw, but you would have to say, has been somewhat kind to United so far in this FA Cup,
mm,
and I don't know if it'll be enough to save Ten Hag's job. If in fact, I don't think it would if they do not improve in the league.
mm,
Um, I think Ineos will have in their mind who they want. For Ten Hag to be that man, he's going to have to convince them. They're already convinced of someone else.
yeah,
In my opinion, who would be ideal. But for Ten Hag to say, I'm your guy, he really has to improve the second half of the season. So it wasn't enough to keep Van Halen a job.
yeah.
United, in terms of their rebuild and continue to rebuild, that Champions League revenue now does become important. But the draw has been somewhat kind to them.
It has, and you know, if you can move forward in the rounds and end up getting to the FA Cup, to winning a final, it helps. That being said, I think the league form is going to be more important, because part of the problem you have as a manager from the FA Cup standpoint is the final's not till what, June, right? I mean, it's the last game of the whole year,
Mhm.
as it was last year, right? The decision's going to be made
Yeah,
well before then, on what
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
And so winning or losing that isn't going to
That's a good
change.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to change your outcomes. It's not going to change your fortunes. So you have to improve in the league, and you have to improve quick, because you've got one or two games and then there's another break, right? Something like that. I don't know exactly what it is, but the league games are not piling up on each other right
West
now.
Ham up next, I believe.
Yeah. So you've got to win games in February. You got to climb the
Mhm.
table. You've got to get back into a serious, at minimum, contention for the fifth and fourth spots um, by end of
I
February,
think
I think.
if he doesn't win, if he was to lose against Wolves, West Ham,
I
I
think
think
that's
because that's around about February, March is the time you
yeah,
really start thinking about bringing
yeah,
someone else in.
yeah,
And I'm not, by the way, I know there's lots of people out there support Ten Hag, and I've largely been one of them. I'm not
yeah,
blind to certain, faults, but um, I don't know how Jurgen Klopp not being at Liverpool changes things. That's going to be interesting to see how it affects their season, how it affects players' futures. I
yeah,
mean, to me, that was odd timing for Klopp to announce it then. But for Ten Hag, I think he's at a point where he needs to. I mean, Wolves away. You've never really. United have won their last 3 games there. Been that entertaining. They're going to have to go there and win, in my opinion, against a decent Wolves side, and they're going to have to beat West Ham at home. Um, if United are poor in either of those games and don't win them, I would be really, especially now with Casemiro back, with Martinez back, with Shaw back. It's getting harder for Ten Hag. The excuses of players being out injured and stuff is he's not going to get away with that in February.
No, I mean, we're pretty much going to be able to field your strongest lineup, or maybe, and you rarely have 100% of your players, but
sure,
you're pretty much going to have your strongest lineup in the next couple of games. There's been no further injuries as of now. They're working back into match fitness. You have Varane, you have Lissandro, you have Shaw, you have Dalot, who you've chosen as your first choice right back, as far as I understand right now. You've chosen these players and you've made these decisions. And so, yeah, you're going to have to get performances out of them at this point in time to see anything. And there's Klopp leaving. There's Tuchel probably going to leave Bayern. There's Xavi who's leaving Barcelona, right? That was announced as well. He announced over the weekend. I mean, there's a big vacancies in managerial positions at 3 of the biggest clubs already that were pretty positive is going to happen. Bayern's not confirmed, but I think everybody thinks it's going to. But what's that?
I think Tuchel's going to leave too. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Tuchel.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. I said that one's not confirmed, but I think most people expect it will happen.
I have to be honest. I'm not totally sold on Thomas Tuchel.
Me neither. I'm not a fan of Thomas Tuchel.
I'm in love with him.
No, me neither. I obviously I think you and I both think it's probably not correct to get too much into discussing like potential future managers and things like that at this time. I don't think it's fair to do that. I don't think it's right to do that. I wouldn't be super happy with Thomas Tuchel. That would not be certainly not up on my list of managers where I thought, oh yeah, that's going to be a guy who comes in and make a difference. I mean, I'd rather have Unai Emery, than Thomas Tuchel at United. But anyway, yes.
I know we're not supposed to speculate, but what about Xavi?
Yeah, he's an interesting one, but I don't think he'd be right as well. It's funny. I thought that with Barcelona, I mean, I know they had a bit more success, but in some ways it's gone a little bit the way it went with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer here at United. They were more successful. There's no doubt about that. But they've had an interesting time under Xavi where, as a sort of an underqualified manager appointment at the time, former player, all of that. It went really well. Like it was like a rocket ride at first, and then started to dwindle to the point now that they're doing pretty poorly, I think, by their standards, and he's out the door. And it's kind of interesting how that has gone. But there's not a lot of top managers out there. It's part of the thing that people have to understand too, in terms of how things change. And so I think that does push the decision sooner because Bayern is a good job. Liverpool is a good job, and Barcelona is a good job. Manchester United could be a good job. It could be attractive under new ownership. But if you're making a change at manager, you're competing against 3 of the biggest clubs in Europe.
Here's the thing, James, about NEOs that we have to be careful about, right? Abu Dhabi bought City in 2009. Right, it took them a good few years before they really got it right. Inevitably, NEOS will make poor appointments.
Yeah, totally.
After them, right? So there's going to be a bit of trial and error process and all that there before they everything is synchronized and everything is great. But what I would say is, and we said this before, United a month ago was not a job a top manager would want because for obvious reasons. Now, it's a whole different job. And, I wonder how committed Guardiola is to City after winning, the World Club Cup, doing the travel. I just wonder, is he still motivated? If you look at Klopp has been quite snippy for about a year and a half, right? Guardiola is the same way. Like Guardiola was really snippy on Friday about the whole Omar Barada thing, right? And United clearly got on his nerves, right? Because I think he is envious of the fact that United get the credit that he's always sought at City. And I think I just wonder how committed, if Guardiola was to go, Klopp was to go, there'd be a lot of managers out there in England going, this would be a great time to take over United because the landscape is clear. I think City would find it very difficult to replace
Oh yeah.
Guardiola. Even and as we've seen with PSR, in January, it's not so easy now just to go out and start buying a bunch of players. You have to be much shrewder.
Yeah.
So I just, what did you make of Guardiola?
Yeah, it's kind of it's almost felt like for a year, a little bit now, that he really wanted that treble or that at least to win the Champions League with
Yeah.
City, right? I think that was the big thing. He really wanted to win that Champions League because
Hmm.
he didn't win it since Messi, right? He didn't win it as since Messi, and it felt like he really wanted that. And once he got it, there is a little bit of a feeling like there's a limit to the credit to the to the applause you're going to get at Man City as the manager of Manchester City. I think there's a limit, and I think he's running into that a little bit. And he does seem a little agitated, and you kind of get the impression he's like keeps thinking about leaving. I don't know why, but I think everybody gets that impression a little bit that and then he makes comments like, "I'll stay for one more year. Maybe I'll extend. I don't know." And he is who he is, but it's just he is odd. He is odd in how he talks and how he has commented on things recently. That does give me a similar impression, like he's getting tired of it. I don't know where he would go. Back to Barcelona. I don't know.
Yeah.
What he would want to do.
Yeah, that's the other question with Guardiola is where does he go? All right, let
Yeah.
me talk to you about a couple of things about a
Yep.
couple of United loan signings, and then we'll get into a little bit of transfer stuff.
Yeah.
Not sure if you saw what Kiki Sanchez Flores said about Hannibal Mejbri, but he was saying that it's hard to get context of this because I'm reading the words of whether this is
Yeah.
it's a criticism. He goes, he needs time to know what it means to play for Sevilla. He needs to take time to step back. He needs to observe. He needs to see the culture. He needs to see the players. And so he played for a little bit in that Girona game. He gets booked. For Mabry, this has always been something where, in boxing, they have a saying called controlled aggression, right? Aggression is good, but
Mm.
control aggression, right? And how to use it effectively. Mabry's a bit rash. You're going to get away with that even less in Spain, but not a great start for Mabry. Van de Beek dragged off at halftime.
Have you seen some of the comments from the fans of them as
No,
well?
but he 1-0 win at Mainz, dragged over at halftime, 14 touches. He hasn't lasted beyond an hour in any of their other games. Not great for either of them. Joe Hugo, by the way, did score on his debut for
Yeah.
Burton.
Yeah, and the loans and obviously getting good loans has been a problem. Hannibal went to Birmingham City, right, last time. It was actually a good one for him. And I remember because I spoke to somebody who's kind of connected there. Is it Birmingham or was it?
I was at Birmingham last season. Because I spoke
Okay.
to Harry Redknapp and stuff, spoke to people down there, and you could see that loan in the championship really
Yeah,
affected him physically because he was
it
able
did.
to deal with Wrexham's physicality, and some I
Yep.
really noticed it, and I like Mesbury, but and Sevilla might be a difficult club to go on loan to given their situation
Yeah.
for a young player. But anyway, so he was at Birmingham.
Yeah, and because I remember initially there was a lot of the same issues about his kind of recklessness a little bit, being over aggressive, and he seemed to really get under control. And there was a lot of praise for his technical ability, what he can provide. He's just got a bit of a unique skill set in some ways, and all of that. And he kind of built upon it. But it's been a challenge because I think he's really suffered from not having enough play time over the last few years as a senior player to get that aggression under control. He comes off of that loan place. I thought he played a really good game. His first start that he got in that cup game, right? Palace probably was a really good game. And then he barely played since then. So he's had, one or two games the whole season. It's not good for a young player,
No,
those types of situations. It just doesn't work. And then, they fall back into bad habits, especially when you're trying to work them through what is 100% a bad habit. He's over aggressive. He gets himself into physical trouble at times. It's a bad habit, but you're not going to work out of it not playing. You just don't. It's not going to, because those game situations, the heat of the moment things, you're not getting into them in training. you're not getting through them on the
You're
practice
also
pitch.
forcing managers to take you off.
Yeah,
I think one of
yeah,
Solskjaer's worst decisions was not taking Fred off in that PSG
yeah,
game, right? So I think if you're getting yellow cards for silly
yeah,
fouls, whatever, you don't think you're going to repeat that. But if you've got an aggression issue, you get a yellow card.
yeah.
Managers are going to pick you. So, but
I like him, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It is. It's a tough situation. It's a tough team to go to all around. It's not a totally settled team, but what are you gonna do? I mean, yeah, it's gonna be hard for him moving forward at this point if he doesn't get some consistent. If he isn't able to work himself into getting consistent game time, then it's gonna be tough for him to have much of a future right now.
Okay, let's move conversation on to some transfer speculation that's been taking place across Europe. United, of course, this is looking at the summer.
Yeah,
First of all, I want to talk to you about potential of another striker with Hoyland. So this is a bit of a awkward position for United because do you sign a striker, someone like Osimhen, who wants to start every week? How can you take Hoyland, especially if it's a strong second half of the season? But even if he doesn't, he's been starting pretty much every game, and then say to him, you know what, your second season, you're not starting because you really
yeah.
want to do the opposite. First season, we're going to gradually build you in, but second season, then you play more. Are you setting Hoyland back? So do you go out and get an experienced striker that's happy to play, as backup to Hoyland, or do you go out and get a top striker? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a decision that has to be made by whoever's the director of football in making a decision. Where are United at right now, and what are we actually trying to do? Because if they wanted to win titles this year, if they wanted to win trophies this season, then they should have bought Harry Kane last season. They should have done everything they could have to get Harry Kane last season. Does it make sense to buy someone like that now? I don't know. Moving ahead, when you're likely having players like Rafael Varane leave, Casemiro leave, Eriksen's probably going sometime soon. You're going through kind of what needs to happen where you really should be rebuilding. And for me personally, I don't. I would love to have Osimhen as striker. I think he's a fantastic player. He's young too. I mean, he's not like an old player either, so he's got many years ahead of him. Uh, but I don't see how it works with a player like Rasmus Højlund. I think it really depends on everywhere else, I guess. I think right now it would be better to have a player like Cavani, when we brought Cavani
Mhm.
in to work with this team, to work with these young players here who are inexperienced, and lead them and teach them and all of that. And I would buy a right winger, 1,000%. I would buy a right winger, and I would bring in more of like a veteran, type, like a Cavani type, someone in that mold to come in who was absolutely good enough to contribute, but doesn't need to start all the time and has a lot of, can teach them many, many things.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what you do this summer because obviously they could sell Sancho,
Yeah.
they could sell Mason Greenwood, right?
Yep.
Potentially sell Anthony. Anthony might be tough, but you could bring in a lot of money or with
Yeah.
those couple of cents. Sancho might not help you with the FFP, but certainly, a Mason Greenwood sale will. However you feel about Mason Greenwood, he's obviously a very talented player.
Yep.
And reputationally, a club in Spain could sign him. Whether he's at the level where Real Madrid would sign him, I don't know. There's not a lot of places you could go to outside of that. And if his reputation will survive him coming back to England, and I understand everyone has very strong emotions on this. Maybe there's a conversation inside United saying we keep him. I'm not saying they should or anything like that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Mason, and how do you even place a transfer value on him. It's going to be very difficult. If you think about it, at one point United had Greenwood, Sancho, Anthony, and Rashford, and they've had problems with all four of them now.
Yeah.
Due to their own off-the-field issues, which has really got nothing to do with the manager. So it'll be interesting to see what United do. The other player United are quite heavily linked with at the minute is young Michael Olise at Palace. So he's supposed to leave at the end of the season. If Palace stay up, be interested to see what they do. He has been Palace's best player this season, even better than Eze. Most man of the match, 5 goals, 1 assist, it's not Leighton, but Palace are not a great team, to be fair.
Yeah.
Can play on the left or right. He was a United fan growing up. It's French. What do you think of Elise?
I think he's a fantastic player. I've highlighted him a few times in some of my own videos some months back. I know he's someone that's been on United's radar for quite a long time. He's a right winger. He's ready-made. When you talk about the policy of, maybe not the policy, but the implication that was reported from a good reporter, Semi Mockbell in London, about Ineos wanting to get some players with Premier League experience. We talked about that because it makes the transition a little easier. Not all players, but some. He's a player I think who would come in right away and be successful and put that spot down. He has all the tools, all the talent. I think he's a fantastic player. I would love to see him come in. I think, if you had the options of him, Rashford, Garnacho on the wings, you have three players that have all proven they can contribute at a high level in the Premier League and beat you in many different ways. He's I really like him. That's all I can say about it. I've watched a fair bit of him. I really like him. I think he'd be easily my top choice for who they bring in as a forward this summer. And he had a release clause about 35 million a few years ago. He did a new deal, signed, and it's somewhere around 50 million now. It's about as bargain as you can get to buy a player with that kind of fee from England, who is a proven player. Comparables, you have a guy like Neto at Wolves, but he's had major injury issues. And so Elise has two, to be fair, but it's been a bit more recent for Neto, who's had a big injury this season. And you want to see how he returns from that and what happens. He's also been a player of interest, but young Elise would be at the top of my list. His brother's at Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the other option.
Chelsea probably don't even know that themselves.
Right. There's so many. But yeah, that's the other option. But I feel like there's a lot of indications. I've heard a lot about his personality. He's a bit of a character, from what I understand. It's like he's a very ambitious person. He's a very ambitious person. He thinks very highly of himself. I think a lot of times you have to be successful at this level. And I think he would love the challenge of playing for Manchester United, right? Personally.
Yeah, and there's players in that price range you can get a good value. I pointed out Joe Pedro at the weekend that I thought, really, really good signing for Brighton. Lastly, young Genk midfielder Bilal Al-Kounas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My apologies if I've done that wrong. 19-year-old Belgian kid, has a contract till 2027, 4 goals, 10 assists. Is a young player that lots of clubs around Europe are watching, and he would fit the profile of what United are looking for this summer.
Yeah, I can't say I know much about him. I know that, Arthur Vermeeren, who's just signed for Barcelona or Atletico, right, was a player that United had watched before. And I think it would be really smart to pick up a player like that. With the age, you look in the midfield, McTominay is somebody
looking at a bit of Ericsson and stuff, where fill some of those positions out with some young legs that are willing to sit in the bench, that they can grow into positions as well as obviously.
Exactly.
So because they've still got to find a solution to Mount and a couple of other players, but so I mean, he's a good young midfielder. I think you'd have enormous amount of decisions to make this summer. You've got the Rafael Varane situation, you've got the Casemiro situation, you've got the frontline situation, Wan-Bissaka, because I think they do need a right back. So you're talking about a centre back, you're talking about a right back. You're going to have to rejig that midfield, in my opinion, and you have to address the forward line. So there's a lot
to do.
United to do this summer, which is another reason why I feel that with Ten Hag, the rope will be shorter, because the work that needs to get done this summer is not going to start in May. That's going to start once this deal gets approved in February. Then you'll start to see the whole structure fall in place of the director of football, the technical, all the stuff is still going to start taking shape. And then, of course, how United recruit will change dramatically, hopefully a lot more expeditiously. And with a lot better information. One other quick story that made the
Yeah.
headlines, sort of got lost over the weekend, was Igliotari, who said that it was former Lazio director, said that Manchester United had failed with a bid previously for Milinkovic Savic in the price range of 85 million.
Yeah.
Um, I would have loved to have seen it United a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was a player that every single year he was linked with him. And every year I heard this is a real link, but it just never happened, you know? He was somebody they thought that could replace Paul Pogba pretty
I had good
very
information on him around because around 2018, 19, somewhere
yeah.
around there. United were seriously pursuing
Yeah.
him heavily.
Yeah, and he would have been a good replacement for Pogba. He has a lot of similar traits in some ways. He's a big individual, big player. I would have liked to see him. You know, he never really got a move. You know, he never got that move to somewhere else, and it's just he's an interesting player. I would have really liked to see play for United. I think he could have done a lot. He could have been he could have been fun to watch, but you know, it's really interesting because there are a lot of times where United have made moves for players like that somehow just doesn't ever really get reported on concretely, that they've actually like made an offer, made a move for a player and goes under the radar. And so don't be surprised, I would say, you know, with Ineos, that we might be see a little bit more of that, similar to the Barada appointment, where
Mm-hmm.
something just comes out of nowhere, including the director. You know, there's people, there's names, there's people may not be thinking of. There's guys like, you know, Rui Braz, the Benfica director, who's apparently going to take has going somewhere at the end of the season as he's a director in Portugal. And you know, who knows? There's probably a lot of names that could come out of the blue in terms of these positions and things like that that go
So
under the radar.
you see the Bilal Alcaraz thing. So that has Man City written all over it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you look at one of the first things that Peter Kenyon did when he needed to put him on garden leave, goes to Chelsea, is he hijacked the Aaron Robin
Yeah.
move, right?
Right.
And so there'll be a lot of that where City have an exceptional wealth of knowledge on exceptional young players at that level all across the world, where now you're going to see United being linked more and more because they're going to have to be far more intelligent with how they buy, you know. So I think that signings like that, they'll have a mix between players with Premier League experience, and that's pretty much what Ratcliffe was doing at Nice. Was, you know,
Yes.
experienced players mixed with young players. I think that with United, you're going to see they'll be much more active in the South American market. The likes of the Echeverries, they'll be United will be much more active on that, with having the advantage of the multi-club model with France and Lausanne. And you know, I think
Yeah.
that these are the types of things we will see more and more of. So looking forward to seeing how that develops. Anything else before we go, mate?
No, I think that's it for now. We're obviously going to see what happens, you know, in the next few days. We'll see what the outcome of some of the Rashford stuff is and how it leads into the Wolves games. And I think there's a vote with regards to this whole process, which is happening start of next week, Monday, right? A week from today. So, you know, I think shortly following that, it's expected that we will have the Premier League ratification. I don't think it can be ratified until it's approved in the New York Stock Exchange. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be an official deal at that point in time. So I think we'll see that pretty soon following that. And then, you know, I think there'll be quite a bit more noise and things to talk about at that time once, you know, from a more official standpoint, Ineos can get their hands in on things.
I don't think we'll have a quiet week between now and the foreseeable future at Manchester
I
United.
don't think so.
There's something other we meant to touch on that you mentioned it on this podcast last week was United did let go one of their physios
Yes.
that you had touched on that got confirmed a couple of days
And I have
later.
a name of a new one, but I'm still
Bang
waiting
on
for an
the
answer.
money again, Mr. Chiefs.
What's that?
Bang on the money again with your inside
Yeah.
info. That bug you placed in Manchester United.
No, don't say that. They got
Oh,
hacked some years ago. I gotta be...
sorry. Where's the other? No. It's once again, you were on the money, my friend.
Yep.
Yeah, you can see that, United making major changes. What I would be interested to hear on that is that I would assume that met with Eric Ten Hag's approval, that he
Mm.
was consulted on that. I'm sure it was in Ten Hag's interest to not blame his own methods. I'm not saying it is his methods, but it's interesting. I would be surprised if they did that without Ten Hag's approval.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is Gary O'Driscoll's been given a big remit on changes.
Okay, so maybe it was his decision
Yeah,
then.
yeah, very specific.
Don't
and
imagine he spoke
told.
to Ten Hag about it and the players about it,
I'm
saying,
sure
"Hey,
there's dialogue and part of his assessments of it and saying, look, yeah, this whatever reason, this is not the right guy. Let's get somebody
mm,
else for this job. And whatever the reason. And I think the difference is with Ineos because they cannot be given credit for making this decision. They weren't the ones who made this
of
decision.
course."
But people being allowed to make decisions is going to be is it's a change. I mean, that is a change. People being allowed to make decisions at United, who should be allowed to make those decisions, is a change.
James, the way United have acted since pretty much Christmas Day has been
Yeah.
completely unrecognizable. The how Manchester United have ever acted in
Yes.
20 years, 18, 19 years of Glazer ownership. So clearly, Ineos are already deeply affecting the direction and the decisions that United are taking. So that's more of that to come. I don't want to see anyone lose
Yes.
their job, but
Yeah.
it is United do need to make these changes. All right, folks, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Don't forget, you can follow my friend here at Muppetiers and fantastic content outside of this podcast. If you're on the BTP side listening to this, make sure you are subscribing to his YouTube channel, to James's YouTube channel, downloading his other stuff, being part of the Discord and what have you. There's lots of other exceptional information that this man gets right and does tremendous work in making sure it's accurate. For those of you who are on the Muppetier side, if you want to listen to more of my content and you can get past my funny accent, I had a People interview on Thursday, which is quite interesting. I did speak with Andy Mitten today. It's going to be part of a series called We Are United podcast, and it's going to be comprised of different interviews of different fans all across the world that have amazing stories where Manchester United transcend cultural divides, religious divides, conflicts, and we all unify under one identity of being a Manchester United fan. There's so many incredible stories out there that aren't being told that I'm excited to tell. Not every one of these interviews is going to be with high-end people that have big prominent platforms, because United Diaspora consists of lots of different people that don't have big platforms that I want to hear from. If you have someone that you think I should be speaking to that has an incredible story related to Manchester United, please email me beyondthepitch@gmail.com and let me know. So I will also have this man on at some point to talk about his love of Manchester United and how it evolved. So thanks to all of you for all your support, and don't forget to support our fanzines, folks, because they are for us, written by fans, for fans, and the content is exceptional. So all right, man. Take it easy, James.
Yes, you too. Thank you, everybody.
See you, pal.